Tangihia rā ngā mate o te motu whānui ke ai te kōrero e ki nei ngā mate o te wā. Hara mai, haere. Tātou kei te Aotearoa ati hewa mauri ora, and welcome back to the hui. Moves to shift homeless people from the streets of downtown Tāmaki Makaurau have been met with concern by those working with our most needy in our communities. Now, we'll talk more about that shortly with our expert panel, but first, here's another look at a story from May this year in which reporter Ruwani Perera explored the growing crisis of homeless rangatahi in Tāmaki Makaurau and looked at kaupapa Māori solutions.
The glittering nightlights of Aotearoa's biggest city conceal a grim reality. Somewhere here, under bridges, in doorways, hundreds of homeless seek shelter, many of them young and alone.
What's it like not having a whare and a roof over your head and a bed to sleep in? What's that like?
It's really dangerous. The streets, they're pretty dangerous for young people like me to be there.
What kind of dangers?
Violence, drugs, sleeping in public is real dangerous. And the bridges and car parks.
Kat's called the streets home since she was 10. She's now 24, and in that time living on the street has become even more unsafe for rangatahi like her.
We're talking about young people experiencing homelessness. We're talking about, in some cases, children living on the street, living in environments where they are at constant risk of being physically assaulted, sexually assaulted, where their lives at times are at risk.
Youth worker Aaron Hendry runs Kickback, a service based in central Tāmaki offering wraparound support for at-risk rangatahi.
It's been really good because I'm learning from here how to pretty much cook, have showers, because I've never learned how to do that, so yeah, it's quite good.
Right now, Kickback's monitoring around 100 or so young people in the city. The youngest is, 11, 12, 13. A lot of our young people are now being directed towards lodges and hostels. These environments are often really unsafe. The pricing is often exploitative. Talking like $660 for a tiny, tiny room that is dark and mouldy and cold and damp. It doesn't seem like the government understands how much of a risk they are putting these children, these young people's lives in. This is a crisis.
Homelessness in Auckland has grown 53% in the last quarter, and that's only those sleeping with no shelter. Several factors have contributed to this. Firstly, the government slashed $20 million from rangatahi transitional housing in last year's budget.
Since then, we've seen more young people seeking support, being denied that support and sleeping rough and being in really dangerous situations as a result.
Then in August, the government changed the rules around emergency housing criteria, giving preference to families over young people, which has left rangatahi like Kat more vulnerable than ever.
I had slept in my car with a friend of mine. We went to Work and Income. We tried to ask for some help in housing, but they just turned us away and said no.
We've noticed in our stats that nearly 100% of our young people have been declined from emergency housing.
Mahera Maipi has seen it become harder for rangatahi to even get on housing waitlists. She runs He Pā Piringa, a 10-bed accommodation facility for homeless youth.
As soon as I moved in and saw the area and how spacious it was, I fell in love straight away. And everything was here, beautiful kitchen. I was like, fantastic. I was like, holy, cool as.
Zavania Mead has recently moved in.
Easy as rules, just keep it clean. It's really standard. Just show up on time, look after the place. So yeah, have high standards and keep it that way.
It's a tikanga-based kaupapa Māori solution to the housing crisis.
The rules of the marae are exactly the same rules when you come to our whare. When you go to your marae, you know you've got to take your shoes off at the marae. You know that if you got angry, you can't punch holes in your marae. You will get in trouble for doing that. Same. At our whare, you don't punch holes in the walls.
All young people here have to stay a year to learn the skills they need.
How do you become a good custodian of your space, your whare, the people in your whare, the belongings inside of your whare? If you can learn those skills at He Pāpiringa, you can transfer them into your life and you can use them wake tonu atu for forever. We've had 0 property damage, 0 police call-outs for violence against each other, which is an achievement in itself. It's unheard of, not just in New Zealand, but actually all over the world in terms of youth transitional housing. We had people who were really keen to hear what Māori solutions look like, because in the world, Māori are trailblazing in so many areas in so many ways, and their thinking was that that would transfer over to youth homelessness as well.
He Pāpiringa can't keep up with demand.
Over 100 young people on the wait list, and we've only got 22 beds available.
But once their time is up, they face more uncertainty.
So now all I'm focused on is trying to get mihi because I need money to carry on.
We are very clear with them. We're only here for a small time in your life. We're only going to be able to do this much. But then where do they go? And if hapu and iwi aren't fully resourced, then it does come back to the government. It does come back to those people to fill in the gaps.
Think about the reality that for some children, the first time they get a roof over their heads, the first time they get food in their bellies, the first time they get some form of stability is in a prison for children. When you actually start to reflect on that, something is going seriously wrong in our communities. Something is seriously wrong with our priorities. And that's the consequences of homelessness. That's the consequences of abandoning, our children.
Rangatahi like us, most of us don't have a choice. And seeing them like this is heartbreaking.
There are times where they're leaving our doors and we fear whether we'll see them again. And that's the thing that keeps me up at night, is that we're going to lose someone. That one of the young people that we care for and we love is going to die because they are in the wrong place at the wrong time, or because they give up hope.
Nō rere ke mautunu mai rā e whāma, ka haere tunu ngā kōrero e pāna ki te hunga rangatahi a whaiwhare ana I ai nei. Our expert panel, Liz Cassidy Canning and Green MP Tamatha Paul, are with us next. Hoki mai anō i ngai iwi ki tā tātou hui kōrero, ki tā tātou hui kōrero rangatahi anō hoki, for a closer look now at the issue of homelessness and rangatahi, and also possible solutions. We're joined in studio by the CEO of Whare Āwhina and Whangārei, Liz Cassidy Canning, and Green MP Tamatha Paul, who's with us as well. Tēnā kōrua, nau mai. Good to see you both. You've seen our story, that was done in May. One suspects things haven't changed. In fact, one suspects things have got worse, Liz. Is that the case on the ground at the moment?
Absolutely. I guess if we think about the story we've just seen, it's just hugely unacceptable to be okay with leaving our tai tamariki in these conditions. I mean, this problem has been a problem for a long time. So the pause that we saw earlier this year is a pause that's been on our communities forever. And we have amazing community providers working with tai tamariki that have the answers, that know their young communities, that know what they need, and yet the call or the response from government is simply to ignore and to not listen to what actually would be a win in terms of making a difference for young people and ensuring that they're safe, they're cared for, and that their rights are upheld as young people of our community.
Tamatha? Whakaaro?
Well, totally agree. I mean, when I think about the rangatahi that I've talked to who have experienced homelessness, particularly over the last 2 years, the potential is massive. These are young people who have been allowed to slip through the system. These are young people who have lived in state care, come from violent homes, come from nothing, had no responsible adult in their life to help pull them up. And then they go into an MSD office to try and get housing. They try and, access these systems, and they're told that they are the problem. And that is the problem.
It is, I think the word that you mentioned earlier off camera was punitive. In fact, further criminalisation of those, as you say, who have fallen out of the system for various reasons. But this is the approach of the current government.
It is. And we need to be really clear. There has been no group of people in our society that has been a bigger punching bag than rangatahi Māori, who are overrepresented in people experiencing homelessness right now. They have been the punching bag. They have been, consigned to the streets to sleep under bridges, to sleep in bushes. They have been told that they are lazy, that they are not good enough, and that they do not deserve help. Now tell me, what person or government in their right mind does something so cruel?
So the government's response to this, Liz, will be we are trying to build more family homes in places, particularly in cities like Tāmaki Makaurau, where there's huge need. And its response is, this is what we have to do.
I think the government's response is to ignore it. So at least 2 years ago, we did some research with our local tai tamariki in Whangarei. We extended slightly to Tai Tokerau. Young people came up with the solutions. They know the answers. And that research was largely ignored. Young people said, we need to get out of your system and get into a system that welcomes us, that says to us, we're here to help you, but we're going to walk alongside you, we're going to support you so that you can meet your potential. Because when we work with young people, we know in our mihi, when we work with young people, we put them into homes, we give them the spaces that they need to develop. They just thrive. And you can get them on their way and they can reach their potential on their own. But right now we're not giving that opportunity. We're not even looking at young people. We're just looking at units of housing. We're not placing the value on the rights of young people.
So is this a part of the power and community approach that you talk about a lot, trying to give power back to communities to find community-led solutions? How do you find space for rangatahi in that approach?
Well, it's providing spaces for rangatahi or going to the spaces that rangatahi hang out. So that might not be us. So sometimes we have to outreach or we have to partner with other providers. Makes absolute sense to go to the places where young people, again, feel safe. So they're not in the kind of generational spaces that some homeless communities sit in. They're not part of that network. And it was, I think Aaron talked about it, they're not safe spaces for them. We need to ensure that we're in the right place for young people so that we can engage and give them the opportunity to look for a home, to get a home.
Yeah, this is the holistic approach that you've been talking about a lot. Given your experience in Wellington, Timothy, you talk about this as well. It's that holistic approach to housing. It's not just about building a unit, as Liz says. It's about the overall support approach that we need for young people. How do you do that best now, given the growing need, Timothy?
Yeah. I mean, a roof and shelter is one thing. I mean, it's a really important part of having stability. I mean, who can live a good, decent life without shelter? But it's only one part of the equation. We've got to remember that people experiencing homelessness often are dealing with trauma, sometimes mental health issues, addiction, histories of violence, and it's more than just the roof that is needed. It's what happens in he pāpiringa, which is, fully seeing these rangatahi as full human beings who have not had that responsible adult experience or influence in their life. So how do we bring them in, make them feel like part of the whānau and give them the tools so that they can actually sustain a tenancy in the first place? So yes, having affordable housing available, whether that's with kāinga ora or a community housing provider or in the private rental market, is a really important part, but then giving them the tools to sustain that, find employment, live a decent life, provide for their tamariki if they have a whānau. Those are all the key parts that are going to help someone sustain a tenancy, and those are the building blocks on which they can build a decent future for themselves.
Can I ask you both a question? Do we know how big the scale of the problem is? How many people we're talking about? Do we have enough information now to lead us not just in terms of development of policy, but in coordination and being able to find solutions for the program? Do we know how big the problem is at the moment, Liz?
Well, through our Manaaki Rangatahi network, we know that the problem is huge. So we heard Aaron talking about 100 people, 100 young rangatahi. In Whangarei and Tai Tokerau, I can't give you the exact data. And I would also say it's not my responsibility. Where I want to direct government is help us get that data for you. We can meet those deliverables if that's what you want. But we're certainly going to collect them for you because we're on the ground and we are connecting with them.
Yeah, I've heard the Ngāti Hine Health CEO, Tāmaki Shepherd WIPCE, say, we've got some data. Government didn't even know, hadn't even heard about it.
Yeah.
So you're saying that we actually can get access to that data to be able to assess how big the problem is and then find solutions from there. How come the government doesn't know?
We have access to the community. So we have access to the sisters, the brothers, the aunties, the uncles, the nanas and the papas, as well as our young people. Government in Wellington doesn't have that. They need to come to us and say, look, we're going to give you a win. We're going to go out into our communities and we'll get you the numbers. But you need to see, you need to respond, when we get those numbers, not simply say, we're going to redirect.
Yeah, how important is it for you, not just for the Green Party, Tamatha, but for you, because you've been in this sector for a long time, how important is it to maintain that role, not just in terms of developing policy, but also as an interconnector, right? Maintaining those networks to communities.
Yeah, absolutely important. And I just want to touch on the data side, because I think that is really important. We don't have data in Wellington. That's correct. We don't. And the only reason we know how much homelessness and rough sleeping has increased across the country is because a group of councils and community organisations came together, collated all of their data and created a national insights briefing which told us the scale and severity of increasing homelessness in this country. Now, why doesn't the government collect that data? Because if they collected it, then they would have something that they had to be accountable for. And what have they done instead of collecting that data? They have changed the parameters by which we measure homelessness, which is classic National Party techniques. If we can't solve the problem, then we will change the definition. We will shift the goalposts to make ourselves look better. Hey, look at us, we've gotten this many kids out of emergency housing. What about the other 10%? Where did they go? That's right, we don't know. We don't know and we don't care. So I think data is really important because I think it would also show us, if we knew the true scale of homelessness, we could see exactly what it would take to solve it overnight. And that is possible, but it requires political willpower.
Tamatha Paul, Liz Cassidy Canning, tēnā kōrua. Thank you both very much for your time. Really appreciate it. E mihi ana, ki ngā kai kōrero, e tiwi ki utoru mai. After the break, up to 4,000 Indigenous scholars, academics and leaders are in Tāmaki Makaurau for WIPCE. Legendary scholar, distinguished Professor Linda Tuhiwai Smith is with us next. Kei Tāmaki Makaurau, te iho o te kōrero mātauranga iwi taketake I aia nei. For the first time in 2 decades, the World Indigenous Peoples Conference on Education is back in Aotearoa, hosted by AUT. The opening keynote speech on education, systems and policy was delivered by our next guest. She is Distinguished Professor Linda Tuhiwai Smith, and she joins me now. E te ahorangi, tēnā koe. Very good to have you here. Thank you for coming. You gave the keynote this morning, a powerful oration and presentation. What was the key message that you wanted to give to the 4,000 academic leaders in the Indigenous world here in Tāmaki?
I wanted them to think carefully about what we're trying to achieve through education, because we have lofty goals, huge goals, but allow ourselves to be measured by inadequate measures, for want of a better term. And that the best way to think about excellence, for example, is to think about it in intergenerational terms.
You talked about being a good ancestor. How do you measure that then?
Oh, that's exactly the challenge, right? How do you measure a good ancestor. And I was thinking, actually, you know, my daughters will be great ancestors, my mokopuna, and I don't mean just my biological mokopuna, all my mokopuna I know will be great ancestors. But how do we build that into our system so all our tamariki, all our mokopuna are prepared to be those wonderful ancestors that, you know, who we still reference, right? We still look to, we still love.
How do we pair that approach with a system, particularly in the current political climate, which seeks to actually not celebrate that aspect, doesn't measure us in that way, doesn't measure international outcomes for Indigenous peoples in that way? Can we still be a part of that system and achieve those outcomes?
Well, the cool thing is I think our people know enough to be able to continue to do that. The not so cool thing is we have a government that are very hostile even to our own definitions of what makes us successful as a people, and are hostile to really the strength of our identity located in te reo, located in mātauranga Māori and tikanga Māori. So when we have a government that's for all intents and purposes trying to tear that down, I think what gives me confidence is we have a generation of rangatahi who have been built up on it and who are staunch and strong and will not unsee what they have seen. They will not unlearn what they have learned. They will continue. And if you look at our demography, they are actually the future of this country. So, you know, in a way, I think what's happening right now, it takes me back to when I trained as a teacher in an era in the early 70s, which was focusing on compensatory, it was called compensatory education. And it was all about, you know, filling up our children with a knowledge sort of based on the idea they didn't have any knowledge. Well, you can't do that anymore because our children have a knowledge, because our communities have insisted that their knowledge be valued, be taught, be honoured, and be a part of their everyday lives.
You also were a part of activism in the 70s, with ngā tamatoa. How important is activism now, do you think, in terms of Indigenous academic leadership, particularly not just this government, but lots of governments around the world at the moment, the way they treat Indigenous knowledge and Indigenous knowledge systems?
Yeah, in a way it's not, depends what you mean by activism. I think Indigenous people just continue to do what they need to do to survive. And if that means being active, if that means resisting, if that means speaking out, if that means practicing their practices, and that's activism, well, we will continue to be activists. There are also those who specialise, if you like, in particular kinds of activism. But I just think in order for us to live the lives that our people aspire to live, we have to continue to be active. And if that is referred to as activism, well, be that as it may, but it's just us being ourselves.
So is that what you meant when in 2023 you received the Rutherford Medal from the Royal Society and you talked about the need for Indigenous knowledge within big institutions of knowledge where Indigenous peoples and communities are? If that's what you mean, is this still plausible then to retain, to maintain, to reinforce Indigenous knowledge in big institutions? Or should we be much more mana motu hake tino rangatiratanga approach?
Well, I'm quite happy for parts of big institutions to come and join wānanga, for us to develop our own medical schools and engineering schools. In the meantime, wherever people are being trained to impact on our lives, we need to be there, and our knowledge needs to be there. So if big institutions are training professions and, capacity that is going to make a difference in our lives, then we need to influence that training. They need to know how to talk to us. They need to know how to relate to us. They need to know how to engage with us. They need to know how to respect our tikanga. So those are really simple things. But generations of people have not been taught those things. And it's usually got them into trouble.
Mm. You are, and I saw this today, you are an inspiration for many people in the field of Indigenous academic research. The hundreds of people lining up to take your photo in the morning tea break is an example of that today. What advice do you give up-and-coming Indigenous academics now, aside from those things that we are talking about, in the times in which we live? What advice are you giving to those Indigenous academics now?
Build their knowledge, do it well, know what they know, be really good at what they claim to be doing, so strengthen themselves, and then do the mihi, do the work, learn, have a, commit basically to a life that of service.
I find that interesting, given you have just released and have written a series of children's books called the Whatu Manawa Collection about aroha nurturing the resilience of children who have experienced something traumatic. Why is one of the world's most acknowledged and renowned Indigenous academic leaders writing children's books?
Because people forget to speak directly to children about the things they witness and experience. And if you think about trauma, one of the biggest groups in our society who witness trauma in family and households are children. And often their ability to process that trauma is inhibited by adults. So adults are often a bigger barrier to helping a child cope with and process what they have experienced. And our children witness the most awful trauma. So I wrote the books, each of them has really come out of some of the research that I've been engaged with. But I remember thinking, I was in an airport looking at some books to read before I got on a plane. And I thought, there's no books here that talk to the people that I see witnessing and being impacted by the very things I'm doing research on.
Tēnā koe. As a beneficiary of your commitment to Indigenous research, thank you for joining us today, and thank you for the keynote this morning.
Thank
really
you.
Appreciate it. E te aorangi tēnā koe. That was, of course, distinguished Professor Linda Tuhiwai Smith. E ngai iwi e haere ake ana, I tātātou hui, coming up on the hui.
The doctor met us at the door and said, your son's not good.
How did a night out with mates turn into a parent's worst nightmare?
That's when I realised that I'm never going to hear his last breath.
A whānau left grieving and fighting for justice.
We'll never forgive him for what he did and what he took from us.
I've always given 100% to the kids, but sometimes 100%'s not enough.
Nō reire ngai wi koe rā a tātou kōrero I tēnei wiki. That is us and our hui for this week. We thank all of our pū kōrero. Join us next week for more. Until then, e ngai wi kia mau ki te turanga o te patupu a te haumi e, hui e, tae ki e. Nā te puna whakatongarewa, te hui I tautoko.